Whoa, those legs have become thin. Welcome to my mental disorder. In a world where mechs have become as flimsy as the plastic toys they're supposed to sell, ask yourself, what's happening to mech design? Both in the past and today. Surely, some of these changes must have been the result of incisive events, others signs of gradual processes. Join me, and by the time the night is over, we will have been visited by the spirits of mech design past, present and yet to come. Unlike most videos on mecha anime, this one is not about the characters but actually the mechs. Also, sorry for my crude editing. Another quick note, I made a side video to this that has among other things a disclaimer on my stance towards weapons and war. You don't need that to understand this video, it was more for my own conscience. In order to get going, I want to define a few terms of the mecha genre like super robots and real robots, to create some common ground and lay out where this is going. So I call the genre mecha and the individual machine mech, okay? In the most simple terms, a mech is usually an upscaled machine man, often with a pilot. Saying which is a bit reductive considering the immense diversity in designs ranging from humanoids to quadrupeds and floating crystal people. Also, you can of course find them beyond Japanese media, but let's stay mostly in Japan and in anime. That should be representative enough. The history of mechs in anime starts with super robots. They can be your magic friend from space, perhaps even sentient and with emotions. And they do wondrous things. Real robots, on the other hand, are often war machines. Their sci-fi technology is more grounded in reality, often some kind of fusion of fighter planes, tanks and perhaps spacecraft. They tend to be used in grittier war dramas. By the way, I'm not going to talk about their weaponry. I am going to talk about the modern mechs, which real and super robots evolved into over time later in the video. But let's waste no more time for now and look at the designs of the first mechs and ponder about their influences. You could do it like me and go to any anime database, click on the mecha tag and sort by ascending release date. Anime or manga, Astro Boy is the first, but since most of them share the design principles I want to point out, I'll just talk about the first decade of the genre as a whole while I show some relevant images. Look at the arms and legs and to some extent the torsos. Round and bulbous. Makes sense if you put rockets for legs. Those are round and that's a good shape. Let's take a quick look at real technology of the era. This step and the next one shouldn't surprise you yet. TV, round. Telephone, round. Cars, round. Spacesuit, round. Tanks, round. Planes, round. This is gonna be important in a moment. What does contemporary sci-fi say? And maybe even this bastard? It's one of the simplest and most practical shapes, so why not use it for your manga and anime? But as art history shows, after simple comes complex. Along came this blocky boy. A quick Google search for Gundam Mech Design Origin gives you this great Forbes article by Ollie Barder of an interview with Kunio Okawara, the Gundam designer. So apparently he was mostly inspired by astronauts and samurai armor, but those are round, while the original Gundam has sharp edges everywhere. Where did those come from? The design process is never explained in that much detail. They do mention though that it was a team effort. And now I'm almost certain that someone on the team was a fan of fighter planes, which would of course also fit the military themes of the show. I say that because what I see in that design matches something very important that had happened in the aerospace industry just a few years prior, which would be the FX and VFX programs of the US Air Force and Navy. I can see so much of the F-14 and F-15 in there, I swear. Those are their, at the time new, air intake designs. Rectangular with sharp 90-degree angles. Obviously, mechs and fighter jets are somewhat adjacent. Even mech-to-plane transformers are quite common. But has anyone ever thought about actually looking for traces of real planes in mech designs, because I have never seen a comparison like this. I'm not crediting Gundam for inventing this concept as hinted at in the last section, since previous planes had mostly rounded corners and edges. Even if some of them have rectangular air intakes, they have rounded corners. Compare those to these NATO planes from the 70s, all with very prominent air intakes. And for a fair comparison, a similar trend can be seen on the Soviet side. They might have been a bit more obscure to the average Japanese civilian though. That looks like a process of implementing sharp corners and edges into fighter design. Putting all those 90-degree angles on your mech shortly after fighter planes did the same seems a bit suspicious. While we know that the Gundam was changed from whitish grey to colorful for marketing reasons, why exactly do you think blue and red were seen as fitting colors? Also, a variable wing sweep is like the closest we've gotten to mecha and will always be awesome. I'm sure a lot of the geeks in the anime industry admired the machines flown by both the Americans and their own defense force. Yes, actual fighter planes and tanks are a common sight in sci-fi anime, but I have never seen discussion of how their designs could have inspired mechs. Maybe I could find that somewhere as a side note in interviews and making of footage if I looked really hard. Or even just a single fighter jet in a YouTube video on mecha. While I put mecha legs in the title and I have a few words on those specifically in a moment, this talk of real military vehicles inspiring mechs concerns the designs as a whole. Moving on to my next point, the good guy in Gundam resembles an American fighter jet, while the bad guys look like old Soviet tanks. Coincidence? And then I realized that I had just identified mech design types. A tank type mech and a plane type mech. There's even a few battleship ones. Which type a mech belongs to is not only expressed through their visual design, but also in how they move and feel and in what way they are used in their show. Like, brown and olive painted mechs tend to be more tank-like, while white and grey are for planes. But why make them mechs in the first place? If I was asked to design something like a walking tank, probably for rough terrain, I would seek inspiration from machines like the Battlefield 2142 walkers. Essentially a tank turret strapped to an ostrich. Awesome photomontage skills on screen right now! It shouldn't collapse under its own weight, so it would be relatively small, also keeping a somewhat low profile. The legs would allow it to crouch and take cover, still a lot taller than modern MBTs though. Weapons would be attached directly to the turret and arms would be optional for pure utility machines. Congratulations, we have achieved tactical. And that's not for everyone. Again, why are mechs like they are? Probably because watching a humanoid shape doing the action makes it easier to understand the emotions of a fight, especially when the pilots are usually just comfortably sitting in their chairs, screaming. I'd say every fight scene is improved by replacing the people with giant steel behemoths. But tell me, what purpose exactly these legs have once we inevitably go to space? Striking cool poses, I guess. And arms to dab on your enemies. Everyone knows that these machines make close to zero sense, like being able to walk, fly in and out of atmosphere, swim and sometimes even drive is super redundant and wasteful, but that's not gonna keep anyone from enjoying the genre. This link between mecha and military vehicles would however suffer greatly from the course of history. With the end of the Cold War and a less highly paced arms race, the amount of fresh inspiration there for mecha declined, and the place of these war stories in our culture changed with the old ideological adversary gone. Living in a post-80s OVA bubble world probably didn't help either. Fortunately, mecha had become big enough as a genre to, among other influences, inspire itself in an endless remix. But of course military otaku stuck around, which is why mechs incorporating elements of real machines were still being made even if they became rarer. Neon Genesis Evangelion. I knew I would one day have to say these words, oh my god. Neon Genesis Evangelion is often credited for pioneering original TV anime, but Anno's real sin was putting this lanky girl on the Olymp of iconic mechs. Just a little joke of mine. Now I don't really know about earlier examples of this type of design, but honestly, would they matter that much if they aren't popular enough for me to see them? While the three Eva units are quite different from each other, and I'm sure they take inspiration from lots of different places, like most mechs, don't tell me you see something that's not air intakes on Unit 01's cheeks. One of their main characteristics would be the thin construction with armor plates in wedge form. And this might be stretching it a bit again, but please, one last time. That looks very similar to 5th generation stealth aircraft like the F-22, which, while not yet in production, was already known by the public precisely because the end of the Cold War lowered the amount of secrecy. It was not a black project. All the people at Gainax were smoking something crazy. If I wanted to point to some older technology Unit 01 is evocative of, I would choose planes like the Su-27 and the older F-16 that have their wings connected to the fuselage by these sharp flowing curves, which I would associate with elements like these edges on Unit 01's face. By the way, Japan's own version of the F-16, the Mitsubishi F-2, completed its maiden flight like 3 days after the first episode of Eva aired, but I don't know how public the plane's development was. The F-16 had been around for some time anyway. The people at Gainax would have been aware of it exactly like how they knew of the Su-33, a naval flanker variant, as is evident by its presence in Episode 8. During this time, a lot of types of mech designs coexisted, and they would naturally only get more diverse, their numbers increasing so much that it seems impossible to take all of them into account. Relatively recently, extremely thin and elegant mech designs have become more important, contrasting against the earlier real robots, especially those with the really thick legs. Some even walk on what are essentially stilts that couldn't support their own weight. Not that any of the previous designs wouldn't have sunk into solid ground, but when you are being confronted by the dreaded square cube law, fudging the number for your mech's desired weight is not very credible, so I guess they're made of either renderite, unobtainium or handwavium. I call them crystal mechs. Did I confuse you just now jumping around through like the last 3 decades of mecha history? Sorry, but as I see it, the release of Eva kind of marks the point where mecha had fully matured as a genre and entered an age of modern mech design. What was there of the homogeneity in contemporary designs during the early phases of the genre had kind of faded away, or I lost track of it. Even today, when mecha is supposedly in decline, new designs are thought up all the time, and they cover the entire multidimensional spectrum that ranges from super robots to real robots and back. The automatonism spectrum. And now, just like my grasp on the topic, this video too slowly fizzles out with my random side bits leading nowhere. So let me try to close the circle and quickly summarize my main theses again. Real technology does inspire science fiction. Who would have thought? But the point is, I can see the F-15 in the original Gundam. So more specifically, breakthroughs in, for example, fighter plane design can be incisive moments in mech design. So was the end of the Cold War, but for different reasons. Mech designs and those who make them only ever get more diverse. And we are in an endless remix of mech designs. Where will the journey lead us? Certainly spiraling in and outwards to new places. Just maybe keep an eye out for those future planes and tanks, because I'm sure I'm not the only one doing that. And maybe some mech designer is going to show me something nice in the future. There's not really anything to base any of my claims on, and that's not much. But thinking about this was pretty interesting, and all these ideas came quite easily to me. So either write a comment to tell me I'm an idiot, or leave a like if you think I'm onto something. Don't watch any of my other videos. Leave now, this is not a good place. Until next time.